All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back for another episode. We have another incredible guest with us. Today we have Melissa Shevchenko in the house. She is the owner of Fitgirlsrock. She leads the Bold and Badass project and is the head coach of the Badass Tribe. Former bikini competitor, health and fitness for over 10 plus years in the industry, and she has had one incredible come up story that I cannot wait to talk a little bit about. So, Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course, of course. Now,
Nice
Melissa, I don't
intro, by
know
the
what,
way.
what's that?
I said nice intro, by the way.
I appreciate that. I take pride in the intros. Um, now, before we get started, I don't know if you remember, but you were actually one of my coaches in OTM. And I got to say, one of the best ones because I learned a ton. Between you and Adrian, I wouldn't have the business I have today because of you guys. So thank you.
You're welcome. Awesome. That's nice to know.
Of
Nice to
course,
hear.
of course. So now let's dive in a little bit because I like having people on that not only are incredible coaches, but they've like walked the walk. And you are kind of the definition of that with your story and everything that you've been through over the years. So would you like to start off the audience with just like a little background on you and talk about like what started you in fitness and what brought you to where you're at today?
Absolutely. Um, I think I've kind of always been somewhat into health and fitness. I played team sports and everything all through high school. I was very interested in running, sporting events, things like that. After I left high school, I really started getting hardcore into running, kind of just keep my activity up. Had never lifted weights or anything. And then I got married in 2011. And after I got married, I thought, you know what? I really want to dive into this whole weightlifting stuff. I'm going to hire a trainer. I'm going to get really involved. And I did that. And it was super for my confidence, super for building I'm capable of big things and I'm really strong. I'm way stronger than I thought. And it exuded into all other areas of my life. And then I thought, I can take this a step further and I can compete. So why not? So I went into the competition and, it was good and it was great and it was challenging and it was high discipline, high focus. And I was determined and it was good until it wasn't. And then when it wasn't, it was that crash that comes after kind of like any typical, I think, yo-yo diet. And if you don't have a proper mindset and I think a proper body going in, you're ultimately going to crash at some point. And that was me. So that's kind of how that story played out. And after the competition was over, I had a lot of health issues. My body image was terrible. My mental and physical health was worse than it was. My relationship with food, exercise, the scale, everything was just way more heightened than it was before I went in. So from there, I kind of started to dig into myself a little bit in terms of mindset, in terms of where I'm at, where I want to go, what I actually am after when I'm saying, I want to do all these things. And that's basically, I want to be able to live my life and have a donut on occasion and still be super, lifestyle and health oriented, but not necessarily have it be extreme. And that's when I started doing my certifications. That's when I became an in-person trainer. And from there, I decided I want all of my clients not to have to make all of the mistakes that I made along the way. If I can make it simple for them, if I can make it sustainable for them, and they don't have to experience all of that hard stuff that I had to experience, I can make it a little bit easier for them that way. And that's when I started a business. And then from there, it just grew. After, it was entirely in person until 2016. And then in 2016, I did John's OTA1 course. And then I started dabbling in online training a little bit. And from there, obviously with 2020 and COVID, I completely pivoted online. And I guess the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, I gotta say, I am so jealous of you for jumping on as soon as COVID hit. Like, talk about striking while the iron is hot. So many amazing companies came of that online.
Absolutely. And I think for me too, it was because I was kind of caught in, I wanted to transition online. I kind of want to be able to live anywhere in the world and do what I do. But there was like, what's that next step? And then all of a sudden, John comes out with this next course. So it was kind of like a no brainer for me.
Yeah, I remember coming across anybody who was wondering who John is. John Goodman is like one of the leaders in the online training space, if not the leader. And he like literally wrote the book. So, I mean, when I came across his stuff, I'm like, how did I not know about this guy until COVID? Where has he been?
Right? Crazy. Yeah.
But him and yourself and a bunch of others are just part of that powerhouse of fitness and nutrition that is in Canada. For some reason, Canada has a ton of really good talent out there. So you
Sure
guys
enough.
all lift each other up.
Absolutely, we do. That's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, of course, of course. Now, when it comes to how you talked about your bikini competition, was it bikini or was it physique?
Physique.
Physique, sorry about
Actually,
that.
actually, let me say this. There was bikini, fitness, and physique. So I was the one in the middle.
Okay.
I was fitness. I was doing fitness.
Gotcha, gotcha. So you were in the fitness category, and I know pretty much all of them, you kind of got to go to the same mental space of like, I just got to go hardcore, lock it in, and just block out everything.
Absolutely.
So, do you have that conversation when you have clients who are like, listen, I want to get in incredible shape and talk about some of the trade offs that you made?
My messaging is that I think that if I had a client, I think most people who want to compete probably wouldn't choose me. But if they did, I would say, you know what, if this is what you're adamant about, here's what I'm going to tell you based on my experience. But at the same time, I don't think that it's not a good goal. If you're in the right place and your headspace is good and your body is ready, I think it's a great goal. I'm personally not the coach to get you there. I'm
Yeah.
more about lifestyle, sustainable. I want to be free. I want to be able to eat these foods, but also rein it in and practice moderation and understand those things and understand the harder choices are important. So when somebody would come, if somebody would come to me with that, or if I had a client that maybe brought it up when after we had started training together or something, I would sit them down, yes, and I would have that conversation. These are the things that you're probably going to experience. These are the trade offs that are going to happen as you go through that process. Are you sure this is what you want? And if they say, yeah, you know what, I'm sure that's what I want, and I think that their body is ready and their mindset is in a good place, I will absolutely refer them to a coach who can get them there. If, however, I don't think they're in the mental space for that or that their body metabolically is ready for that, I will absolutely 100% explain to them why, and then maybe suggest what we would have to do to get them to a place that if that's still their goal in the future, here's where I will know or how I will know that you're ready. And then we can refer you out to somebody who can get you there.
Love that. And for anybody who's listening and they're like, "Oh, that I I hear what you're saying, but what do you mean by being ready?" Because I think a lot of times when people hear dieting and they're just like, "I just eat a certain amount of calories or I eat a meal plan and that should get me there." Like, what else is included?
So I think that I'll explain it based on my own personal experience because I wasn't ready. Had in hindsight, knowing what I know now, I should have never competed. Just based on the fact that I was already like a typical woman at that time. Most women were eating like birds. We're doing a ton of cardio. We're only just in my case just getting into lifting weights. So just I don't have a lot of muscle mass. I'm in my mind, carbs are bad and all of these things are bad. And I've done diet after diet after diet. So my body is already on lower calories. It's used to lower calories. So I need to build all of that up to get myself to a place where it's healthier and better for me to go into fat loss and go through that whole entire process. So for instance, if I'm at 12 to 1300 calories and I'm having trouble losing weight there and I'm legit at 12, 1300 calories, then that is telling me now that, Melissa, you're not in a good spot metabolically to go into a competition diet. Now we can build you up. So a lot of people call that reverse dieting. We can reverse diet you back to get you at a higher calorie range so that then you can healthily go into competition diet and be very successful. And the other things that I would look at from, again, personal stuff is I was obsessed with the scale. I was obsessed with just food in general. I didn't have a good relationship with all food across the board. I was, again, like I said, afraid of carbohydrates, and a donut was completely out of the question. And so it was super hardcore. And it was this mindset of the only way you're going to succeed is if you eat like a bird. And the only way you're going to be successful is, in addition to eating like a bird, you have to run every day for like 10 kilometers or whatever. And if you don't run, you're not succeeding. Things like going for a walk and things like that didn't even come to me naturally because if I couldn't run, I wouldn't go at all. Those are the kind of mindsets that now in hindsight were terrible mindsets for going into a competition.
Yeah. And I think a lot of this seeps over into like the general public when they're like, I just want to lose a few pounds. And it's like, so how do I do that? Well, this person looks really good online. I'm just going to follow what they do.
Exactly.
So, so when you, let's say somebody has done that and somebody's listening right now, and they're just like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go down this path of like, if I follow this plan to a T, I'll get results, but then I'll gain it all right back. Like, where would you start if you were somebody just like listening right now that maybe hasn't dieted lately and they're like, where do I start?
Honestly, I always like to start everything super simple. And I always like to approach things with, I mean, across the board, if you want to lose fat, you need to be in a calorie deficit. You need to be in a moderate calorie deficit so that it's sustainable, and you need to be consistent with that. But if we take that even off the table, how do you do that? I always suggest adding things in as opposed to looking at all the things you have to take away from yourself, because that's going to build a better mindset around all food. You know,
Mhm.
we have this classification, most of us, or have had this classification of good versus bad food. Well, we can look at
Mhm.
nutrition instead on a spectrum: less nutritious, more nutritious. We want to have more nutritious stuff as opposed to, and less of the less nutritious stuff, absolutely. But if we look at adding the more of the healthy stuff in, then that's going to automatically reduce some of the less nutritious stuff anyway. So if we look at adding things in like more protein, more complex fibrous carbohydrates, more vegetables, more fruit, more water, and just little simple things like even looking at, how many specialty coffees do I have a day? How much alcohol do I drink a week? And then starting to maybe even looking at reducing those small things that maybe they will be a little bit hard in the beginning, but they're not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. Even how much condiments and stuff like that do I use? Things can be
Yeah.
reduced very simply. And then I also think practicing mindset things like how you talk to yourself makes a difference. Going for a daily walk to help yourself relieve some stress and to also get some movement in. Um, Looking at it from, if you actually truly want something that's sustainable and going to last forever, I think also coming in with a mindset of this is what I want, which means that it's going to take longer than anything else that I've ever done. But everything that I've ever done has always been on a cycle. I do it, I stop, I gain the weight back, probably and more. Whereas this time, I want to keep this going forever. So I have to think sustainably if I want something sustainable. And I
Yeah.
think that's
And
really
all that just sounds like you're going to be really full and nourished. Isn't that like not what you're supposed to do when you're dieting? I thought you had to suffer.
and these are the other things that I think so many of us, and again, I was one of these people. I have to white knuckle through, I have to be miserable, I have to be always hungry because I want fat loss and I want it tomorrow.
And
When
you wouldn't have earned it. You wouldn't have earned the right to be the fit person.
Exactly. So I think that if we look at it as well as, yeah, there might be some hunger because technically you're taking some calories away to achieve fat loss, but you shouldn't be, I always use the term ready to chew your arm off because you're so hungry. You should
Yeah.
technically experience a little bit of hunger in your belly. But if you're nourishing yourself with, plants and protein and water and fibrous carbohydrates, you're very rarely going to be hungry, at least anytime starving.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like how you brought up tracking too, because people don't seem to realize how big of a difference it makes when you make tiny, tiny changes, like the fact that you have dessert for breakfast in your coffee, or the condiments that you use, you're dousing them. You're like, how much could that really be?
Yeah. And I mean, we're terrible, all of us, myself included, at eyeballing things. I mean, over time, I don't track anymore in terms of calories or anything like
Mhm.
that. I did for many, many, many years. I don't do it anymore. And I always talk to my clients about the fact that tracking is not something you need to look at as being sustainable. Tracking is something you use as a tool, just like you use a scale as a tool to get yourself used to portion sizes, understanding where your gaps are. And looking at, things like, could I add more protein? Could I do better with fiber? Am I getting enough vegetables and fruit? And then as you go along and as you learn more about the calories, protein, carbs, fats, what you need, how you feel, you can eventually work yourself completely out of tracking and still be able to maintain what you've achieved. I'm living proof that that's possible.
Yeah.
So
And
go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
No,
I
no,
don't
go
want
ahead.
to cut you off. You're the guest.
No, no, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that seems like it should be common knowledge that like that should be like the end goal of let's get off the trackers, let's learn how to live life. And tracking too can help you understand what exactly you can get away with when it comes to maintenance. It's like, so how far can I push this? How big is that maintenance window? For me, it's like, can I have that Vans waffle sandwich with the Klondike bar in the middle at the end of the night? If the answer is yes, awesome.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point because it also, as Brian said, sets you up then for, I guess, knowing more what your flexibility is in maintenance. Because you can still have flexibility in fat loss too, but you have to be a little bit more diligent. In maintenance, you get a little bit more freedom, but as you're tracking through your process of fat loss, you will learn a little bit more about how much of that freedom you actually have versus I'm done now and here's all the things. And this is another reason why when I teach fat loss, I teach it, you can have the donut and you can have the things so that you're not completely deprived when you go into maintenance and then you want all of the things that you couldn't have during a fat loss phase. So I'm teaching that you can have a donut or cookie or whatever. And I always use donuts because that's what Kevin and I usually tend to go to when we go out somewhere.
If you're gonna do it right.
Right? Absolutely. Peanut butter donuts all the way.
Ooh.
Um,
And you and John V with the donuts.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can have that flexibility in fat loss. It's just it can't be as flexible as it gets to be in maintenance. But the maintenance level flexibility still can't be run of the mill. You can just do whatever you want. It has to still be, you still have to make some harder choices in the moment, even though you're in maintenance, so that
Yeah.
you don't revert
Because
all the way backwards.
yeah, and I know a lot of times we compare tracking to keeping a budget when it comes to finances. It's like you can't just spend, spend, spend and expect not to be broke.
Absolutely. And actually really like that analogy because it really does make sense. The two do coincide. It's the exact same thing, really.
Yeah, yeah. Because those of us that actually like know the science behind all this realize, yes, that is exactly how it is. But I think the waters get a little muddied when you go on social media and people are like, no, it's because of X, Y, and Z hormone. It's because you're not doing it for your blood type or your body type. And it's like the people that know their shit are like, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, well, based on, I think, keeping what I always tell people when they first start with me is that we want to keep things so simple that it makes it almost impossible not to be consistent because consistency at the end of the day is the only thing we can't tailor. Everybody has to be consistent. We can tailor almost everything else, but everybody has to be consistent. So if we go extremely hardcore and extremely complex, the chances of you being able to be consistent with that, especially at this stage of the game, is pretty slim. If we can start super simple and it's going to feel super basic, but if we can start that way and get you used to being consistent, and maybe we won't even need to add anything on as we go, but we can always look at things we can add on to improve the process as we go and as you get more consistent.
Exactly. And I know I've heard it from clients and I'm pretty sure you've heard it too, where they're like, is this it?
Exactly.
Is like this all I'm doing? And you're like, exactly.
Yeah. And I think that getting bored with it over time is a good sign. You
Yeah.
know, at the end of the day, sure, we don't want to be completely bored and, but I think that learning to get your uh kicks, for lack of a better word, from experimenting with some recipes or some spices or whatever on your food and experimenting with getting stronger in the gym as opposed to constantly having to feel like you need a new program or new exercise every week is important because when you learn those things that's how progress actually happens, and that's how you get to a point of consistency, 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 consistency.
Yeah. And I know that it's tough being online trainers. Like we put the program in and it's kind of like set. So when we're in person, like I know you did in person training too, like you could do a little finisher at the end where it's like, let's have some fun. And
Yeah.
I catch myself putting them back in too, where it's like, hey, if you want to spice it up, like the strength movements are going to be your chicken, are going to be your vegetables. But if you want to throw some different seasonings on during your workout, that's at the end where it's like, do your cardio, do your arms, do all the fun stuff.
Yeah, I do that too sometimes actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun and it breaks it up and it keeps everybody going because at the end of the day, the longevity aspect matters.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I want to backtrack to what you talked about before about self-talk, because this is a big, big one that I think pretty much every coach I've had on this show that is really, really good always covers this with their clients. It's not just the X's and O's of eat this, not that, or do this workout. It's how are we doing upstairs when we are mentally having conversations with ourselves. So how do you like to bring awareness first and foremost to how people do treat themselves when they don't even realize it?
So I'll give you an example. I just had a client reach out to me. She's a new client because I just started my 6-week program, just started week 1 this week. And she reached out to me today, and her first words were, "This is what I always do." And anyway, it was this whole story of something she always does. And my first response, point 1, is you need to stop telling yourself this is what you always do. Because if you continuously repeat and believe that this is what you always do and that you can't overcome it, you are going, basically, that's going to come to fruition. You're never going to be able to overcome it because you continuously tell yourself, this is just who you are. This is always what I do. This is who I am. And so if we can reframe those type of words, we can help you then build to this self-belief that you can overcome it, because now you're going to take steps to overcome it. And it can also be another good example of something that you've probably heard and I hear a lot is, I did this, it's what I always do, I'm super disappointed in myself. And then it kind of goes on with all these feelings and how they're stuck in this hole of disappointment. And I always point out in those moments that your feelings are absolutely valid. And, yeah, it's hard. But what if you, instead of wallowing in disappointment and pitching a tent there, what if we go over here and we say, okay, I'm disappointed in myself, but what can I learn from this? And what can I do moving forward? What is the language that I could change to say, okay, this happened, I'm disappointed in it, I do this often and I don't like it. So here's what I'm going to do moving forward. And yeah, I'm disappointed in myself, but I can overcome this, or I can learn to do something different, or here are the things that I'm learning from this so that I can overcome this hurdle and this won't be what I do all the time moving forward. Those are things
Yeah.
that I like to point out. I also like to point out when people say things like I can't, or I have to, or I'll try, because I feel like those things are also like, I'll try is, I have a way out. So if I don't do it, I only have to say I'll try. I'm not going to say I can or I will. And I can't is basically just setting you up for, I can't do it. And so I always like to point out those things. And a lot of people will go, I didn't even realize I said that, or I didn't realize I'm telling myself this. Or I didn't realize this was the story I've had on repeat for, and now when I reflect on it, it's been for years and years and years. And then if I can help the client build more self-awareness around those things, and then they can start to reframe them in their mind, then that makes a huge difference to how they show up down the road and how much confidence they start to build in themselves when they all of a sudden are making a different choice than the one, or saying something different to themselves than they were saying before.
Yeah, that makes me remember one of the previous guests I had on, Matthew Hedden. We went down a little more of a spiritual path, but basically the concept was that there's something in the Bible, I believe, that says the mouth is the rudder for the soul, and basically, like if you pay attention to your words, you get a bigger grasp on where you're at mentally.
Absolutely. And that's
And And it when you were saying like there is no try, I'm like, obviously there's the Yoda phrase where it's like do or do not, there is no try. But I think a lot of people need to get into the habit of, instead of try, just say I'm gonna do it and I'm gonna find out what the heck happens after the fact.
yes.
Like just fuck it, let's do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have this thing where every time a client says, "Okay, I'll try that this week," or they usually say something like, "I'm going to try to," which is something that they didn't do well the week before. And I always say, "Let's rephrase this." Because when you say I'll try, you always have the opportunity then to kind of back out, because I only said I was going to try. I didn't say I will do X. I didn't tell Melissa I will do X, Y, Z. I told Melissa I'm going to try to do X. And that gives me an escape or an out, or I can't do it, so why am I'm not going to bother. If we say I will do, and it's only one word change, but it makes a difference. I will, I don't know, eat vegetables with all of my meals, eat vegetables or fruit with all of my meals this week. You just said you will do that. So now we have to determine how you're going to do it with simple steps, rather than I'll try to eat vegetables with vegetables or fruit with all my meals this week. There's a big language difference there, and it
Yep.
matters.
100%. Because as soon as you say you're going to do it, your brain shifts and says, oh crap, I'm actually doing this. What do
Yeah,
I have to do different?
absolutely.
Yep. And now, when it comes to everything that we just talked about, another big theme that came up is that a lot of your language was shifting towards what they have control over and what they actually don't have control over. And do you find that a lot of people seem to get a little bit caught up in what they can't control and that affects what they can?
100%. Um, I think that a lot of us have this tendency to dwell on, especially when we're in a higher, I always find it more when we're in a higher stress situation. But regardless, like somebody can be sick and they'll focus only on the fact that they say can't work out because they're sick. But they don't focus on the fact that they can control their hydration. They can control what they eat. They can control how much rest they get. They can maybe even potentially go for a walk, depending on what the sickness entails. And they're so caught in the fact that they can't work out that all of this over here that they can control is really hard to show up for. It's almost like they go down a rabbit hole of, if I can't do this, what's the point of doing this other stuff? And that's just one example. But I find it often with higher stress situations too. People go into a mode of, if I can't do it all, or I can't do it all perfectly, what's the point of doing any of it? And one of my things that I talk about, especially in my 6 week, as we go through kind of like the course portion of it, I'm talking a lot about controlling the controllable, explaining why that's important, and giving people different feedbacks for things that happen in life that we have no control over because we're all experience curveballs. And if we can't do this, you know what? This is fine. You need to give yourself grace because this is impossible right now. And we're not very good at giving ourselves grace either, to be honest. And then,
Hell no.
right? And then we can control these things. And you know what? If you can show up for these things, even if it's only one or two out of the X number of things we can do, you're still making progress and you're still disrupting a pattern that you've always had, which is you used to quit everything if you couldn't work out when you're sick, example. But now if we can learn how to control these things, you're now creating a new pattern for yourself that says, I'm sick. Yeah, okay, I can't control this, but I can control these things and I'm going to do my best with these things over here.
Yeah. And that's huge. And I think it also boils down to the fact that I think a lot of people are very, very scared of change in any way. And you yourself, like being that you like have lived abroad, you've done things in the past where you've done big, big changes. Like what were some things that you told yourself or like mantras or something where it was like that inner conversation of like, it's not that scary and you did it anyway?
So I think you probably know this about me because I tell a lot of my own story and I talk a lot about my own vulnerabilities often. So I'm a huge overthinker. So it's very easy for me to stay stuck if I let myself go down this rabbit hole of, oh my God, this is scary and I can't.
Yeah.
So what I do over time, I think I've learned to develop this thing where discomfort for me now is kind of like, okay, Melissa, you're uncomfortable here, so why are you uncomfortable? And maybe the discomfort is a key that you need to do it. You need to. So I'll give you a really good example of present moment. So I've been asked to speak at an event here in town this week. I don't
Well,
do
that's
public.
awesome.
I don't do public speaking. I'm super uncomfortable. And I was driving. We were driving to Calgary last weekend when I got the offer, and I said to my husband, oh my God, this makes me really nervous. I'm so scared of this. And he was like, yes, but Melissa, technically speaking, you always say discomfort is the key to growth. And if you're not challenging yourself, you're not growing. So this is maybe a sign that you need to do this because I do say that I want to get better at that, but I'm freaking out. And the thing is on Saturday. And I did say yes. And I said yes because when I sit in the moment, it's like there's this combination of excitement, but really, really super nervous and anxious. And what I've done over time is just simply, I think there have been times in my life where I need to rip the band-aid because I'm tired of my own bullshit, is one. There have been times in my life where I need to rip the band-aid because I can't do this anymore. And then there have been times in my life where I'm simply, as I said, as you get used to being uncomfortable, I think it's still scary every time and it still feels like a risk and a fear every time. But once you get used to kind of ripping the band-aid and saying yes to the thing and you do the thing, you build more confidence every time, technically, even though you're scared every single time and that fear
Yeah.
never goes away. You build the confidence by doing the thing because you have that, despite the fact that I'm super anxious and it may not go perfectly when I get on stage on Saturday. I feel like when I step off stage and that anxiety kind of goes down because I've done it, I'm going to be like, yeah, I did it kind of thing. Right. And then that brings that confidence with it of, okay, I'm capable of these things. The same thing as when I walked into the gym that first day and hired a personal trainer. I was super nervous. I had no idea what a deadlift was and all these things. And as I go through the process, we're realizing that I'm way stronger than I thought I was. And that gives you that confidence to want to do more, to want to lift heavier, to want to try new things. And it all exudes into, I think, every area of your life when you start to do those things and you start to build. I always call it building more self-awareness, because once you become aware of yourself, then you're able to sit with yourself like I did in the car on Saturday. Does it make sense that you're so scared of this when you say this is you want to get better at this thing? So why would you say no? That makes no sense. Just because you're scared when you've done lots of scary things throughout your life. And while they may not have ever gone perfect, you have been successful with those things.
Absolutely. And if you treat it like this podcast, no doubt you're going to crush it. But it sounds very similar how you describe that to like exercise, for example. There's a lot of parallels where it's like exercise never gets easy. You just get good at handling hard shit.
Absolutely. 100%.
So I guess the same could be said for change.
Definitely. And again, I think it's the practice, right? The practice improvement, I guess, is something else that I often say to my clients. The more you practice, the more you improve. And then what's hard now isn't as hard or is kind of easy. And then so and recently I've also been saying to my husband that I think in some instances now I like to be comfortable, but once I get too comfortable, I like to push again to see what the next thing is for me. So I've gotten so used to being uncomfortable or pushing myself to growth that now I wouldn't say chase it, but tend to gravitate towards it when it comes my way.
Yeah, because internally like that feeling of like angst where it's like, I don't know if I want, and now lean into it, not like run away from it.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, but like anything, it's like a learned skill, and I think anybody here listening, like if they're thinking, should I jump on Melissa's program or Brian's program, and it's like, I don't know, probably lean into that.
Probably lean in and at least have the conversation. Because this is the other
Yeah,
thing. Um, and I have no problem with this at the same time. I have people who've been following me for years and years and years, and then we have a conversation and they're like, yeah, I'm all in. But I was scared to reach out because of whatever. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. If it takes you 6 years to jump on board, that's fine. However, even just having the conversation gives you a better idea of the person you're looking to hire. Maybe if you have the conversation, you realize you don't connect with this person at all. But maybe if you have the conversation, you're like, okay, everything this person said really resonates with me. And you know what? I'm realizing that I've been telling myself I'm not ready only because I'm scared. And technically, I'm really ready to change my life right now. So let's do this thing. Let's jump into this thing or whatever. And whether it's with me or you or somebody else, I think having the conversation is the first step forward and at least get you kind of a really great understanding of the person you're thinking of hiring, if they're a good fit for you or not.
exactly. Because I think a lot of the best programs and best coaches out there understand like not everybody's going to be a perfect fit, and that's totally okay. But the least you could do is hop on and just have a conversation and be like, is this right for me? Because if it is right and you're putting it off for years and years and years, are you going to regret that?
Absolutely. And I think the other thing, some people, because I've had people say this to me, I don't want to waste your time. For me, you're never wasting my time when I have a conversation with you, because maybe I can refer you to somebody who I think would be a better fit for you than me. Or maybe there's this lingering question that you've had that I've been able to answer for you, even if you don't hire me. And legit, I don't mind having conversations with people who are interested in what I do because I'm super passionate about what I do, just as I'm sure you are, Brian. And
Yeah.
you,
It's
you
like just
feel
getting on
like,
a call is exciting. It's like, woo,
yeah,
let's
exactly.
do this.
Yeah. So even if you don't become a client, it's like I really enjoyed having a conversation with this person. I really enjoyed helping them with this, or I think they would be a really good fit for this other coach in the industry that I know because this is their goal and it doesn't really go with what I teach or whatever. I think that that's important too.
Yeah, and it might be a selfish way of looking at it, but I love getting on just to understand where everybody's head's at because a lot of people hear a lot of different crap out there on social media and everything, and it's like, what are people actually struggling with, or what do we think they're struggling with? It's kind of a bit of a disconnect sometimes.
Yeah, this is a really good point too, because I think because as coaches who are, really into the industry, science based, et cetera, um, we I've noticed that I don't see all of the stuff that I used to see when I wasn't. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
When I first started doing, all the diets and I was competing and whatever, all of this, I'll call it crap now, used to pop up on my feed in social media, or I would hear it in, when I worked for the company that I used to work for, stuff like that. I don't see that anymore now. So when somebody comes to me and asks me a question about this random thing, whether it's a pill or a juice cleanse or whatever, I haven't even heard of it. So now I have to go do some research on it, even though most of the time I already know it's crap.
yeah.
I still do some research on it because I want to know what it is. But I used to hear about these things all the time. Now, because I'm in the realm that I'm in, I don't get that kind of stuff in my feed, and I don't hear it from people unless it's somebody just inquiring about it. So that's also a really good point.
Yeah, I'm the same way where it's like I don't get like the V shred or any of this stuff. Like, and even seeing certain accounts that like completely destroy certain misinformation. I'm like, that doesn't even come on my feed. I don't know where you guys find this stuff.
Exactly. And yeah, and I've found that in recent years, I've been super curious about that, but I realize it's because, all of us that are kind of coaches that are science-backed information, client focused, all about putting out solid, valuable information. We don't get all that other mumbo jumbo, mumbo jumbo
Yeah,
in our.
the algorithm could be your best friend and create an amazing environment to learn a ton of really good stuff, or it could be the complete opposite of that and take you down like doom scrolling hell.
Absolutely, 100%.
But it's important to curate your feed, everybody listening, because when you get a lot of evidence-based people, you start to believe all the actual information rather than being like, I don't know, this other person said this, and that kind of sounds more right to me.
Yeah. Or is it that you want it to be more right because they're telling you it's faster? This is the things that I also find with, I will say, newer clients, because some of most of my clients now who've been with me for a long time know the difference. But I feel like with newer clients, it's, you know, people say, whoever, that if I do this though, I can have these results in 30 days or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but wouldn't, if you sat back and you logically processed that and you rationally thought about that, does that actually make sense? Does that actually connect to what you're actually saying you want? So it's an interesting way
Yeah.
to look at things.
And I think it helps, like, if anybody listening right now can like almost come up with a checklist of things that they want to know when it comes to that next thing that they jump on, whether it's a program, whether it's whatever. It's like, does this actually line up with how I normally want to eat, like for the rest of my life? Does this have an end goal? Like, does this have a maintenance process? Because you'll be surprised how many things don't get through that filter when you hop on a program and you're like, so let's talk about reverse dieting and maintenance. And they're like, what's that?
Exactly. Yeah.
But it is the world we live in. All we could do is try and educate people as best we can. Now, I this has been a great conversation, and I know everybody listening has gotten a lot out of it. And I have one final question to wrap it up. It's a little bit out of flow, I guess you could say, because we've been having such a great convo. But I always got to end it with a question from the previous guest who has no idea who they're asking the question to.
Oh, interesting.
So this one, let me just pull it up right here, is from Blake Parado. He's a gym owner out in Hawaii, and he asked if you could slash had to live somewhere else besides where you currently live, where would you move to and why? And I was like, wow, you picked a great question for the person coming on.
So honestly, Kevin and I have been talking a lot recently about doing some time, I don't know how much time, in Europe. So I can speak French. I did French in university actually. So we have been to Paris and we've been to other places in Europe, but not for like extended stays or anything. So we've been talking recently about how cool it would be to um, go to Europe, maybe live in Paris for a little while, maybe do Spain, maybe do, all these other little areas, and maybe stay for like 3, 4 months at a time and then come back to Canada. So that would probably be my answer. I mean, technically, Kevin and I, every year for the last 3 years, I think, we go to Mexico or somewhere warm for the Canadian winter. If you've ever been to Canada in the winter, you know why.
I'm assuming that's a trend because John apparently does that too, and I'm just like, oh, I guess this is what Canada people do.
Yeah, and I live in northern Alberta, so it's very cold. So we do that anyway. But yeah, so we've recently been talking about Europe. So that's my answer for that.
Nice, nice. And I remember when I was like on the gym floor, every person I asked that question, like what's like the best place to vacation and everything, said like Portugal's a great spot too.
I've heard
So
those things.
yeah, I've heard very, very good things about just that whole section of Europe.
Yeah,
Awesome times. So that yeah, we'll all have to make a trip there eventually.
absolutely.
Yeah, but that I guess that's it for today. So thank you, Melissa, for coming on. Before you hop off though, if anybody has heard you speaking and they're like, wow, I just want to see a lot more of what Melissa's putting out, where the heck can I find her? Where should they go?
You can go to my website, fitgirlsrock.net, or you can find me on Instagram at fitgirlsrock.melissa.
Awesome. And just so you guys don't have to go searching, it's all going to be in the show notes. Just click away, find Melissa, go give her a follow. And one last ask, if you guys heard anything at all during this podcast that you're just like, wow, I really needed to hear that, or somebody you know really needs to hear it, go and send this podcast episode their way. Just don't say a word, just drop it and say love you. And then just say Melissa and Brian say hi. All right. Thank you guys so much for making it all the way to the end. I will see you all same place next week. But until then, go kick some ass. I will see you later.